Our customers are developers, engineers, EPCs, and manufacturers. So PVFarm is a solar design decision-making tool focused on providing the best answers for all of those different demographics.
Hey, welcome back, Solar Warriors, to another episode of Suncast. If you are new here, I just want to say thank you for giving us the only non-renewable resource you've got. Of course, that is your time. I'm your host, Nico. It's my job to make sure that that investment of time yields the greatest reward for you, and that is the ability to add, to stack the value to your existing skill set so you can be out on the front lines tackling our climate challenges and leading the clean energy transition just like today's guests. Two founders from opposite worlds, one coding his way out of Belarus, the other building in Kabul and Zimbabwe, both obsessed with actually making designs that are buildable. How do you turn chaos into a company? We're going to talk about exactly that because let's face it, many of you, I know, as listeners, are in the engineering room. You're in the war room, as we used to call it when I was a project developer, and you're trying to figure out how to address the rapid scale that we need of this industry. And that is everything from which module are we using today on this project to what layout optimizes this site. We've had numerous examples over time of software that cleverly helps you more quickly iterate and map a solar project. But the real question is is what that software spits out buildable? Is it inherently buildable? Or does it take more tweaking? Are you then pulling that into some other piece of software, project management, et cetera? That sits at the core of the conundrum that our guests today, Maksim Markevich and Ben Callam, have set out to solve for you and everyone else. We're going to get into exactly how and why you should pay attention in this episode of Suncast. And I want to thank you for being here. If you find this interesting and you want to dig into more episodes like this, well, we've got more than 850 in our back catalog, 10 years of work that you can sift through. For now, I just want you to lean back, prop up your feet, take a sip of coffee, and dig into the next episode of Suncast. All right. I'm super excited to have this episode today. Maksim and Ben, welcome to Suncast.
Thank you. Thank you for having us here.
Thanks for having us, Nico.
Maksim, I want to start with you. You said that you didn't just change jobs early in your career, you changed gravity. I want to understand for you, what did it feel like for you to go from $4,000 a year and structural engineer in Belarus to someone that people actually sought out for solutions, living in London, building software for a living?
I don't know. I didn't even notice, to be honest with you. Yeah, it was natural. To me, it was all natural.
Yeah.
So basically, when I originally started to build some, a small software programs, a small plugins, initially the desire was just to automate the boring part of my job. Basically, imagine you're placing a reinforced concrete rebars forever, basically, right. and there is a lot of routine. But as I got the first tools that were useful, I just really wanted to share it with someone. I would say that behind all of that is a desire to share and to basically to share knowledge and to share that look, guys, hey, you can do the same, or you can build the same, or look how it looks like, and it's amazing. So I don't even know where it comes from. Maybe from childhood, but I just wanted to share a lot what I'm building. Yeah.
And the key way that you did that is actually you started sharing it like many in, I would say, your generation. You're a few years younger than me, but like many in our current creator society do, which is to turn to YouTube. At the time, it was sort of beginning to gain momentum, and you started teaching how you built these plugins because no one around you really understood what you were doing. So I'd love to hear from you what did making this useful public work teach you about the craft, about building reputation, and about leveraging this new medium of content for opportunity?
Yeah, I would say I remember the first video I shared. It was the video where I kind of connected AutoCAD, MathCAD, and Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And basically I just shared the final outcome, and I got a lot of comments like, why are you showing how it works instead of explaining how it works? And I would say back then I realized that if you really want to share and you want it to be useful, it needs to be educational. So you need to give value to people.
Yeah.
Basically, you bring something to the table, and in this something, in explaining this something, you also kind of, because some people think maybe when you're giving a lot of education and explanations, it doesn't pay back, but it actually does pay back. It does pay back in an amazing way.
Were you able to monetize the effort that you were putting forth in that creator mode?
I would say not directly, because like I think I had like a bunch of couple of thousand people subscribing to my YouTube channel, but indirectly, yes, because I started receiving like many job offers from everywhere. So I started to see more like a problem sets that people try to solve.
Yeah.
It was a Belarus, Russia, Ukraine, that's market, but I started to understand like that there are many similarities in the problems that I'm facing, and indirectly it monetized a lot basically.
And do I recall correctly that the tie that ultimately sort of ported you out of Belarus into London came from someone sort of recognizing that talent through this work? Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate. So basically, I think I was found by my YouTube, or I also built a bunch of like plugins for a couple of organizations like engineering consultancies, and the word of mouth and YouTube, and I was invited to one of the interviews where the CEO of Creo Software Limited, Markevich, he basically invited me to help him building his ideas, basically.
Yeah. I would love for you to tell the story of how the interview turned into more than just a job offer.
It was actually a strange interview. Because like Markevich is a dreamer, and I was like more like like an engineer thinking about like what's in front of me rather than like future 5 years from now. And I remember when he explained to me his idea, I was like, oh, it's a bullshit. This would never work. And then basically, I know that he told this story many times, and he said that what he was impressed is that I explained to him how it should be built, which I also was wrong. But so the interaction was basically, no, it's a bullshit. Look how it should be built. And then it was my bullshit. But that's how it ended up.
That's amazing. I'm curious how you moved from being responsible for an idea to a product to a team. What did you have to stop doing as an individual contributor to really to get into that founder mode?
For me, I would say the first is, in the most important, you need to have a sense of ownership.
Yeah.
So basically, you need to basically to want to have this thing, and you want it to be built in a certain way, and you want things to be run in a certain way. So this comes first, right? But even if this comes first, it's also challenging to let some things go and to build a team you can trust, and to basically start. I would say I remember the most challenging part when you switch from someone who actually doing job to someone who is managing job a lot. Yeah. The toughest part was that every evening you ask yourself, what did I do today?
Ooh,
and when you're a manager, you're like, actually, I didn't do a lot. I just talked like 10 times to different people, and like, so it was really difficult to measure the impact. And that was the most challenging part to me, to basically to understand the fact that when you have a team and you want to build something bigger, it's not about like doing like a small tasks. It's more about strategy, vision, how you put team together, how you build a motivation around it. So you basically, you need to understand that this is the job, essentially.
Yeah. If we fast forward, you became an owner, product, and then sort of functional owner as a C-suite executive at this engineering consultancy in London. Sort of moved into the big leagues. Before we touch on sort of your entree into solar, give me the framework that you have used to pick a domain worth betting on. I'm curious, what signals tell you this is the right arena? I'm thinking of like cycles and data and how you learn and feedback from a person who has learned to build with their hands. How do you, I kind of look at it as world's your oyster. If you're smart enough to do what you've done, you could apply that learning to any field or segment. Can you talk to me about the framework that you could use to sort of pick the domains worth betting on?
Obviously, I want to sound smart and start sharing like deep analysis I've done about the market, but no, that's not the case. You usually start with something you really love, and I think this is an important part, because if you will purely rely on some numbers, I don't think it's actually going to work. So I would say the first actually was the fact that, okay, here's something I really love. building design automation, building design configuration,
Yeah.
and then you basically see the suitable markets. And in terms of suitable markets, I like this simple mental model. It's like a building a factory. So when you build a physical factory, you already have a demand figured out.
Yeah.
Meaning that you already know who you're going to sell it to, and you already know how you're going to distribute it. You already thought about logistics and stuff like that. And I think applying this mental model helps a lot when building SaaS software products, essentially. So you're basically thinking about, okay, how big is the market? And you need to answer many questions. The market might be good enough for you, but it might not be good enough for your venture capital raising strategy. So that's where, like, depending on where the money comes to build this, and depending on, like, do you need like 1,000 customers, 100,000 customers? Like, do you want your average revenue per customer to be like 10K or like 1K or like 100K? So it's like all those factors, they come together, and at the end of the day is a very, I would say, simple, like, physical factory mental model and common sense. That's it.
Then, while Maksim found his pace, shipping product in public and getting really good at iteration, you found yours by building in places where only reality mattered. I want to talk a bit about your experience falling in love with architecture, but eventually becoming disillusioned about the fact that what you're drawing never really felt connected to what actually got built. Can you take me to a moment in time or a project where it really hit you? You realize, I don't want to just design really beautiful things. I want to physically make them.
I got really interested in making stuff. I did some like sculpture classes, like even in undergrad, right? Like by sculpture, I did metal sculpture.
Yeah.
So I cut giant things. I'd be in there with the welding torch and like building, stuff that was as big as I could fit basically in the studio. And just got really interested in making things. So that's actually the reason I loved architecture. I love sort of the impact that good architecture has on the environment and on how people, feel about how it affects how people live. I think it's a really powerful thing. The industry, I think, I worked in the industry for a number of years, and there's still some beautiful parts of it, but like there's a lot of it, and especially in certain markets, just is kind of a tough place and very disconnected from the actual making. I think a lot of people get into it because they enjoy sort of the creative process, and in the generalized, right, in a big kind of corporate firm, that's a very small part of the job these days. I worked at a really large architecture firm for a while, and this was right after the financial crisis in 2008. So there wasn't a whole lot of like kind of sexy work going on. And the projects I ended up working on were, was retail. It was actually retail banking. And I worked with some fantastic people in this space. But this was like the design background I had in architecture school was like really kind of computational, like way out there sort of stuff, right? Very, very imaginative sort of creative process, right? And then coming out of school, I found myself sort of in this position where I was working with one of the most sort of like repetitive types of things that you might do. And there's still fun design problems within this space, but it's repetitive, right? You're trying to do this a similar project many, many times over in as many places as possible, as fast as possible. Right, which is sort of a different problem. You start to look at it from, okay, what are the things that are important to people that I may need to change, or that are important either to the client, important to the municipality that's improving this, and then how does it going to get built, right? How do we do this in a way that is not going to force us to redraw construction documents every single time, right? So that problem set itself really forced me, along with working with really close with the customer. I worked with this guy named Larry. Larry was the project manager for the client, and he just used to bust my balls like all the time about like the building of it, right? Hey, that's not how that should go together. It should go together like this. What if we built it like that, right? And over several years, I worked with this guy and his team, and got just a really appreciation for, okay, you could have a design system. I'd worked on design systems for a long time. I worked on them even prior to architecture but this really got me interested in design systems where you could deliver things. You had a system where you could configure the project very quickly in a way that would meet all of these different design criteria, but also be super efficient from sort of at this point, it wasn't quite construction, but it was the construction documents, which were, very, very detailed. So we did 30 some projects in a couple of years, like in Southern Florida. This is where I really got interested in the building component of the industry, and from there, sort of made a departure out of pure architecture into more of the strict building environment.
Teeing up that, like, made a departure. You had a moment where you moved out of architecture, and then, quite literally, through your wife's diplomatic career, moved out of the country. First to Mexico City, then to war-torn places around the world in Middle East and Africa. Talk me through how that chapter of your life unfolded and what it taught you about building in places where there are actually literally no codes, no supply chains, no safety nets.
No, it's fascinating. I mean, you spent a little over a year in Afghanistan, and at this point, I was working for the government in administering projects sort of across the country. So we're building structures at bases and other sort of military installations around the country. And these are like what they call, it's quote expeditionary, right? What expeditionary means is like people aren't paying that close attention, and you can kind of do whatever you need to do, right? So I go from like this very regimented sort of like, we got to cover all of our liabilities and this and that, and like, don't send them the Revit model because they might use it to build the thing, to like literally go do whatever you want. Like, we just need to get it in the ground, and people are showing up on base and they have nowhere to live, or they have nowhere to work, or they have like whatever, right? And you go to some of these bases, and the conditions, it's some of the, I remember going down to based down in Kandahar, and like when the forces came into Afghanistan, they built a lot of this. The Marine building brigades come in early, and they build this stuff out of like basically stacks of plywood and like very temporary construction materials. Cool, right? That makes a lot of sense from like, first pass. But those structures were still there like 15 years later when I was there, right? So people are still in these things, in some cases where the exterior of the building is like gypsum board, like you would normally put inside your house. It's the outside of the building. So there's also like some purpose, right? People really appreciated the work, but a lot of it was containerized. So we did a lot of things with shipping containers because it was easy to move those around. There was an excess of those. You could fit them out and sort of put them together and very quickly by welding them up. So it was like a fascinating environment where I got to like really apply that. I also got a great appreciation for the trades. Some of the folks that I worked with there, the Afghans, they, I remember this guy that I worked with on one project where, he didn't have a metal shop. It was literally like a guy with some sheet metal and like a ball peen hammer. And he was making amazing like ductwork structures out of like, just with him squatting on the ground and like banging this stuff out on a brick and making just absolutely fantastic things that were super precise and beautiful and whatever. And it was just, it was, I think that project in particular, and I worked in a couple other instances sort of abroad, but you just have to like reframe your thinking, right? The point is to get the project built, and the means to do that are very, very different from what you might experience in the States, like over and over, where you're kind of like the process and the players and all of this stuff is very familiar. Just wild variation, which gave me, I think, an appreciation. It was also super challenging at times to think about how do we do this, right? You have all these different strange constraints, logistics, getting containers off boats and through other places. Like it's a much different problem, and really made me think hard about these systems and how to deliver this stuff.
I remember in our conversations, kind of hearing you talk through the process of these experiences shifting how you think about efficiency and controls. I'm curious about this concept of the connecting design to fabrication, because you come from the design world, and your big frustration was just like, it doesn't look like we made it. We thought it would look right. When did you first get a chance to prove, even in a small way, that a design to fabrication workflow would really work in the real world? How did that can you talk about how you brought that to life?
Yeah, I'd say like there were a number of smaller projects that I've done previously, but working on the U.S. Embassy in Zimbabwe was really like where we were able to shine with this stuff. We, the team there, we all agreed to basically go forward with a full BIM. Like, BIM's been around for a long time, building information modeling, but it's like, it's not, in many ways, it's not leveraged to the extent that it could be, right? So again, this was an environment where we had a lot of say in sort of how the project delivery happened, and we decided we're going to go full forward with this. So we wrote, we got a plasma cutter, we had some other CNC machines, and basically built these workflows in where we could change things in the 3D model, which was basically an as-built at the same time.
Yeah.
And we could spit this stuff out to the field, who was a guy in a shop, just outside the office, and we could fabricate stuff and make changes like super quickly. When you build these systems initially, it's a big effort, right? You have to put these things in place, but they pay dividends down the line. And the project finished early. It was a very successful project from, I think, everybody's perspective, and really allowed us to leverage that in a way that was super exciting. The challenge I think with these things in general is in a lot of spaces, especially if you're, in kind of commercial construction or anything that has sort of these aesthetic values, the challenge is it's likely things are likely to be different in some respect next time, or the players are likely to be slightly different next time, right? And we were talking earlier about sort of these problem sets, right? Like what makes a good industry or a good problem set for the type of design automation that we're building in PVFarm, right? It's like it's minimal sort of aesthetics. It's if any at all, right? It's a lot of engineering, and it's highly repetitive, right? And these things directly flow into efficiencies sort of in the field, and these are the same sort of lessons that we're trying to pull forward here.
So when you had the opportunity to return to the U.S., you joined a company that many listeners will recognize, a company called McCarthy, to start their innovation group. I'm curious, as an outsider, so to speak, getting a chance to peer inside a major contractor like McCarthy, who's working across all different types of infrastructure. What do you feel like you were able to see inside the organization that many folks might miss? I'm curious, how did that help you kind of reframe what you believed software and design tools should do or could do?
When I came back to the US, I was looking at it, talking to a number of different companies out there. And the thing that really stuck with me about McCarthy, which is a great organization, it is really founded on sort of an interest in building. They do a ton of self-perform, and they take it very, very seriously. And they take their crafts, like the sort of hierarchy within the organization is like I don't know, maybe not on paper, but the superintendent is like the most important person, right? Which, as like in my opinion, like as they should be, right? This is the person who is super close to the work, is coordinating the delivery of that work in the field, and has to do so has to understand how things are made in a very deep way, right? And they have a a lot of the work I did with McCarthy was really focused on these verticals, because it allows you, you're not creating like sort of contract efficiencies and things like this, right? You're able to actually, again, sort of tie these problem sets where you have some influence over the engineering and the design, and you have a ton of influence over how that thing is delivered and built. And the ability to connect those is really powerful. So I think we talked about before, the idea here is, when I was working with sort of in the architecture space, architects have done design automation for a long time. There's a whole like theoretical sort of like a bookshelves of people talking about this stuff. What they're talking about though is like basically exploration of ideas, right? This is where they're primarily using this, not for sort of efficiency gains. And I think the big flip here is you say, okay, what are the rules around how that work actually gets put in place. And you start with that as sort of the scaffold, and then you build the design systems around that. So when we talk about verticals here, it's about how do that's how you ensure that the design is connected effectively to the building, because you start with the building. Now, the product is still sort of a design tool, but the foundation of it is the stuff that people want to put in place, the stuff that people can build, they can price, they can deliver, and they can feel comfortable about it.
Was there anything you noticed inside of the kind of the way a typical EPC works that was detrimental or sort of not particularly supportive of the kind of efficiency you felt was possible?
The whole underlying thing for any sort of EPC or construction business is risk management, right? Mm-hmm. That's effectively what it is. It's a risk management vehicle. They're taking money and they're managing the risk on that money for a percentage of it. But that's the business model effectively.
Right.
So when we think about, yeah, I mean, and again, it doesn't take anything away from it, but that's what it is. In general, construction companies, they're very risk adverse, right? These are the important. This is the kind of the core piece of their business, and they're very risk adverse. So what happens often is, if it worked last time, we should do that again. Is sort of and with good reason, right? They're not. You don't want to be doing experiments on a $200 million project, right? That has to be delivered by a certain date, or there's liquidated damages. That's not the place to do sort of experiments, right? So you have to have folks that to properly to make change sort of happen quickly within these organizations. It really has to come again, kind of from that superintendent, right? The field that's who's going to lead that change, because at the end of the day, that's who's going to say whether it goes forward or not. But it's also who has the influence, and because they can understand how that work gets put in place. And this is I don't even think specific to solar. This is a challenge sort of more broadly across any sort of EPC industry where they're trying to work through this vertical, right? It's a massive, complex system. In that pipeline, if you're saying, oh, well, why don't we just reroute the pipe and go do this thing over here? The downside of that could be massive, right? So you have to sort of sculpt this, and you have to sculpt these changes, and you have to supply tools that the people who are putting that work in place can feel confident in.
So I want to turn the corner here and put some practical flesh on the skeleton around kind of the theory of the convergence of the two worlds that we've described here with Maksim and Ben. You've both told me about the first meeting that you had. Ben, you were sort of testing, sort of grilling, as it were, Maksim on sort of his understanding of code and ability to build software. Maksim, I know that you were kind of listening through and thinking, I can do that right now. Why should we wait? I'd love for you guys to talk me through that first meeting. I'm curious as to now co-founders of what became a business from that call. What were you testing in each other? Maksim, maybe I'll go with you first and your perspective on that call, and then Ben.
Yeah, I remember our first call. It was about a different project, but I think I didn't test anything specifically because I wasn't ready to do that testing, but I was impressed by something. So, if you check the Ben's LinkedIn, it's written there that building things that build things, something like that. So essentially, what I loved about our first meeting is basically the skill to imagine the abstract system and to imagine a little bit about how the system can be built. So that's what I noticed during our first meeting, and that's I would say I was impressed that I was talking some nonsense and then he was understanding it, and I was like, oh, that's nice. That's nice that someone get it. So yeah, that's the kind of memory I have from that meeting. Yeah.
I came away with a very similar sort of thing where I'd been talking to for several months, I think, a bunch of other people who were sort of in this space. And as everybody probably knows, Maksim is LinkedIn famous. So I come across Maksim. We had connected at some point on LinkedIn and had this conversation. So I talked to a lot of people who had been talking like actual nonsense, and got on the phone with Maksim, and immediately, in 5 minutes we were talking about the stuff that I'd struggled to get good answers on, like for a long time, right? Like this edge case, do you think about this? How would this work? These types of things. And Maksim, not even just answering the questions, he's actually like pulls up Visual Code and starts like Visual Studio and just starts like changing code and recompiling like on the call, like to talk through these different things. And I was like, okay, I think we could be a good match here for these projects. And it was super refreshing. There's a lot of people who sort of address this stuff, I think, in a very superficial way. My interests and Maxim's interests, I think, are very deep. Like we like to go very, very deep on these problems, and that's part of the strength of our product. And I found that it came across really quickly. I think anyone who talks to Maksim sort of sees that right away.
It's because of Russian accent. Only because of that.
It's compelling.
Yeah.
Ben, I want to continue with you here on defining the underlying problem that it quickly became clear for you could be solved, specifically when thinking about what you were seeing in the construction sort of hurdles that the solar industry was facing. Mm-hmm. So talk to me about like how you began to formulate an idea that ultimately became PVFarm. What was the underlying problem that you thought needed to be solved, and the core belief that you both began to sort of huddle around?
Working very closely with some of the folks at my alma mater, McCarthy, as well, mm-hmm. on this, and getting to understand sort of that there was a Scott Canada who's a kind of led that program at McCarthy for a long time, and I used to have these sort of like late night chats about how do we explore more options, right? How do we make this process? Scott came up from the full scale of this, right? So we talk about projects that were 20 megawatts, and now we're talking about projects that are 300 megawatts or larger, sort of at that time, right? And these problems at a small scale are not that hard. I mean, I'm not saying they're easy, but like you can solve them in a room of people. And when you get into these bigger scales, it's very difficult to see sort of what the ripple effect is of those changes that you make across these different systems. So we saw here in as I started working with Maksim, like we confirmed this very quickly, is that there's a lot of like meat left on the bone, so to speak, because in general people don't have the time to go through these iterations and really explore these different aspects of the project. And that was sort of the genesis of PVFarm, right? And again, grounded in sort of that building, grounded in it has to be buildable in the sense that someone can look at it and be like, I can put a price to that, which means effectively, there may be some problems that have to get solved down the road, and there obviously will be from a detail standpoint, but they feel confident enough that what they see in front of them is going to be something that they can execute, right? And if you can do that, you can do it really quickly. You can allow people to work through this iteration, and they can start to expand the things that they're interested in. Engineers don't get into this space because they like to push paper and because they like to, click 8,000 times, right? They're problem solvers. Engineers are problem solvers, and they're super creative. And they're sort of like the market was lacking a tool that really connected those things. There's tools for kind of the early phase, and there's tools for the later phase, but not really for what would ground that sort of bridge across those two areas.
Maksim, you're an engineer. I'd love to hear your perspective on what Ben just said, and how you started to see this opportunity from the perspective of a software engineer.
So I would say that before that product, I built many other different building configurators, but they all started upstream. And I noticed that it was really difficult to progress downstream to make something really kind of buildable. And so with PVFarm, I like the opportunity right away about like starting closer to construction, meaning that you actually starting kind of downstream. And because at the end of the day, you know, the purpose of any kind of building is basically to be built, right? So, so it's actually, I think there are some very healthy constraints that you can bring from construction, and then basically it's easier to go upstream later on than actually the other way around. So that was like kind of unique feature that I noticed initially, but also like from an engineering standpoint, in a sophisticated projects and in a sophisticated engineering, I see the biggest problem quite often happening when you have like feedback loops and collaboration between different disciplines. So when this is not happening, when this handover or like interactions are not happening properly, that's the perfect place to actually to to have a sub-efficient or not efficient at all the design. So basically that's how, and the problem I saw mostly initially, especially because we were doing some kind of shadowing, basically meaning that we were following people how they design solar PV projects when we were learning the problem space. And what we've noticed is that most of those people, they work kind of in silos, not in a bad way, but it's just they don't have like I would say time to collaborate on many things, and they don't have tools where they can actually collaborate on many things. Because imagine like if you want to collaborate on the trade-offs between electrical and civil engineering, you need to have a tool where you will find that common ground. Because if you don't have a tool, then it takes too much time, because every iteration from civil engineer will need to be kind of followed by electrical iteration, and people usually during the pursuit phase or like tender phase, they just don't have that much time. So that was a perfect set of like amazing problems, and I love those, and also because I do love and that's what Ben does. I love building quite sophisticated engineering products. The only difference is Ben loves making them useful, like easy to use.
Yeah.
And I don't care about whether they're easy to use or not. I just love them to be functional. that's the only difference.
Yeah. I know you guys have joked that Ben's job is to keep you reasonable, Maksim.
Oh yeah, that was fun. Yeah, I actually, when the first time Ben told me that phrase, I didn't get it. It took me a couple of years to start to understand this.
Yeah. Ben, what does that mean for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the flip side of that is like Maksim keeps me grounded in sort of I like to dream, right? I like to start talking about stuff, and I'm talking about things that are 5 years in the future or whatever, and it's like it's sort of like the first conversation that Max talked about earlier with Magomed, where is like, no, that's bullshit. Like, this is what we can do, right? It is like it's a very, very similar conversations in some sense, right? But I think, I think as we work together for a long time now, the balance is really good, right? We bring different strengths to the table. We talk through these things and the solutions that come out because of that balance. I think is really interesting.
Yeah,
I wanna basically comment quickly on the balance thing. I think, I think what Ben means in terms of balance is not the actual balance. Like, balance is quite overrated in our world, I would say. So, it's about rhyming, sometimes we have a lot of arguments, and sometimes it's not about finding the compromise. It's about letting basically each one to drive that particular decision. Because sometimes you need to be practical, and sometimes you need to dream big. And the challenge is not to find this middle space in between those. The challenge is to actually dancing in between those things, and basically choosing the right things at the right moment. That's what balance Ben is talking about. Because it's actually a very it's important definition to bring in.
Well said. Yeah.
I would say also very well said, and also it helps that he's got the Russian accent.
Right.
All the credibility.
You take it seriously. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about something that impressed me that we've talked about in private is PVFarm seemed to come out of nowhere, and it wasn't a demo. It was a fully fledged engine. it was as though if Rivian came onto the market to challenge Tesla without ever telling anybody they were building anything, right? And just as impressive, I might add. So talk to me a bit about the strategic choices that you all made to step out, create this separate business, separate product, how you thought about funding and building that team, and the sort of year or more of quiet, patient capital and building that you spent focused on getting the product right before you took it to market.
Initially, it was actually really clear if we don't have a couple of years to build something, then I wouldn't personally even start. Because I definitely knew from the very beginning that we need to build a solid foundation. Because if I come just do a step back to what I said about disciplines and building a common ground where people can analyze trade-offs efficiently and collaborate, it requires a certain engine and a certain foundation to make it possible. And basically, the fact that we could leverage the expertise and the code we've built, for like 7 years, it helped us to, and then the patience we had, thankfully to our investors, we had this option basically to build something solid and then to start showing this and to refine it and to polish it basically.
We're very fortunate to have some great support from partners early on, and it allowed us to really, we talked earlier about going deep, really getting to the kind of the fundamental problems. And what that space allowed us to do, I think, is just really get down to sort of the first principles issues that you see within the industry. Okay, like what are people actually trying to solve? And from that foundation, it's continued to allow us, I think, to be very nimble and to be very flexible, because we built on this. We spent a lot of time really distilling these principles down to something that that foundation allows us to be incredibly flexible, because there's not at a basic principles level, there's not a lot that changes, right? Like you get a new inverter, you get new equipment, you get someone who's doing something slightly differently. Like if you get those first principles correct, there's not a lot that changes when you go forward. Now, it doesn't mean it's easy, right? We still have to build stuff, and we still have to adapt to this. But that allowed us to build with these partners in sort of build quietly and very deliberately.
Right.
And when we rolled out on the market, all of those people basically became our customers right away, because they had been working with us and we had provided value, and that was a great sort of entry for us.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add on top of that we assembled a great team of people with a very heavy experience in the AEC, in building engines in AEC. So our technical lead Dima, our mathematician Alexei, we have like PhD, we have like 3 PhD mathematicians on our team.
Oh my gosh!
That actually were building algorithms for solar PV, and basically having this arsenal that helped a lot. Yeah.
Can I ask? Because there's a lot of friends here listening to this show, and they're investors. They have been. Paul Grana is a listener of the show, right? Like Helioscope. Folks, I'm sure, are asking the same question in their head that I'm thinking. So I'll ask that question. Just if you could put me in the ballpark, even if you don't want to talk raw numbers, like roughly how much did it cost for you guys to get this thing off the ground? Like how much did you need to raise, and was it enough?
We're lucky to have like some strategic partners in this, and why that's an important sort of point to this is that if we're building a product that is directly useful to them, potentially as a customer as well,
right?
Then they're able to be more patient, I think, with how that money is spent, right?
Sure.
Because it's helping them run their business, and they can feel good about that, right? This isn't we didn't approach this from a sort of VC. We need to go 0 to 20x in 3 years type of thing. I don't think that works. I don't know how that works. Maybe it does work, but I don't know how that works in building products like what we're doing here. This is deep. It requires a lot of industry knowledge.
Yeah.
And we need to be very close to the problem to be able to do it correctly.
I like this dodgy answer. Amazing. That's what I appreciate about Ben. Because great answer. So let's Nico, just to answer your question. We could build it now faster 2 times and cheaper 2 times than what we spent.
Yeah.
That's another insight.
Which is also a way of saying, as the age-old adage goes, raise twice as much as you need and plan for it to take twice as long. Yeah, I appreciate that. And one of the things that I've told you guys privately is that I see, gosh, I must have seen 24 softwares come to the market that claim to do some version of what PVFarm claims to do. And the thing honestly that sold me was when one of my favorite people from one of your competitors jumped over to your team. And I had to stop and ask myself, wait a minute, like, this guy's no fool. Like, what am I missing here? And that's when I started digging deeper. That's when I met you guys, and I realized, like, this is absolutely a story I want to tell. Ben, in that light, I want to give you an opportunity, because it may still be unclear for somebody who's listening exactly what you do. What's the 30-second elevator pitch for what PVFarm does and why it is better than the incumbents in the market?
We're effectively a decision-making tool for folks across the spectrum. So what's unique about us is our customers are developers, engineers, EPCs, and manufacturers. So all of those different people, which are in many ways, their needs are very different. They all trust our product to do the same thing, which is to help them make decisions about what direction their project should go. And what that means is, like, our entry point, as we've talked about, was sort of the point of tender, or the point of bidding, where that's where all of those parties have to agree on the same thing. That's where contracts are signed. That's where money, liability is transferred and money is transferred.
Yeah.
So PVFarm is a solar design decision-making tool.
Yeah.
Focused on providing the best answers for all of those different demographics.
Yeah. And I'm going to, if I may, hopefully this doesn't piss you off, because I like to reference like past guests and examples for folks that kind of do want to put it in a category. But if folks are familiar with the SIFT tool that TerraSmart has, or even like the design tool that TerraBase has created, like, imagine if that wasn't locked inside of TerraBase or TerraSmart, and it was built from the ground up by contractors to solve their problems. That's kind of the way I think about it, right? And to your point, Maksim, like, imagine what it would look like to see how those tools leveraged all of the learning from the industry, and then to build it again from the ground up, knowing what you know about what those tools gave as advantages. That for me is like what I think I see when I look at PVFarm from the outside looking in. I haven't looked at the code, I haven't used the product. I've talked to Joey, I've talked to you guys at length, and that's kind of the impression that I get. Am I in the right direction?
Yeah, I would say it's pretty accurate.
Okay. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's pretty accurate.
So at some point, you all decided to sort of get serious about growing the business, like proof of concept, customers love it. Now we got to scale. And you bring in a CEO, something that is a very difficult decision for co-founders, frankly, I've found, in my opinion. Brian, who's already scaled and exited multiple companies. Like I said, it's not an easy move for founders. What did that conversation sound like between the two of you, and what changed once he came on board? Maybe give some context, Ben, about who Brian is and why he was the choice. But I'm as interested in that conversation between you all as a team deciding to make that move.
I mean, the short answer, Brian was one of our advisors very early on, and he has scaled and sort of exited with a number of different SaaS companies. Now, from different spaces, not necessarily the built environment.
Yeah.
But the guy knows an incredible amount about how the SaaS space works, go-to-market strategies, this sort of stuff. And for Maksim and I, and Max, feel free to weigh in on this, but we, as I mentioned earlier, when we came out of the gate with the product, we were able to convert all those early folks extremely quickly, and found ourselves gaining traction really, really quickly. So we looked at, okay, from a go-to-market standpoint, how do we keep the pedal down on the product and on the technology, and how do we also bring someone who can focus purely on the go-to-market and the marketing side of things? And that's we talked to Brian, and he was game. He was his previous company was sort of adjacent to the space, so he was familiar with. He was familiar with the utility space and some of the things that were going on in there, and it was a really nice match.
Yeah, I would say I would add to this is that I think it's important to acknowledge your own limitations, and I like this PAEI framework: producer, administrator, entrepreneur, and integrator. So we, in terms of like me and Ben, we're more like producers and entrepreneurs. So we have this kind of skill set well developed, and we clearly see the lack of some things on board, and also like if you think about it's just good to have someone. But the conversation was interesting, and I don't think we can. It was it was a very fun conversation between me and Ben.
How long did it take you guys to come to the agreement? Like, yeah, we should bring someone, and that someone could be Brian.
Well, again, he had been advising us for some time, and he came on for about 6 months, I think, sort of in the role. And one of the big things that Max and I talked about from the beginning is like, we're kind of like, this guy's got to show up and do stuff, right? Like this is not a
go in trenches with us. Yeah,
we're a small and scrappy team, right? Like we're just coming out of the gate, and that means that there's a lot of roll up your sleeves. And Brian rolled up his sleeves really, really quickly and was able to jump right in.
I love that. I'm going to use an analogy that I think you guys will probably appreciate, given what you just told me. I was talking to an investor yesterday. Well, he's an administrator at a fund. And we were talking specifically about when you begin to expand your team and you're handing out equity to advisors specifically. It was that was the particular role. And he said, my advice is to founders, don't give equity. I've seen so many people just lose money giving equity to advisors who do jack shit, right? They just sit on the cap table doing nothing and like maybe answer a few phone calls. He said, my advice is founders at a certain level, once you've got a product that works, you make equity a jump ball, right? And that's a basketball term, right? So you make equity a jump ball. Basically, the person that jumps for the ball and does something like takes it down the court, they get equity. And for me, that analogy like really resonates when you're thinking about like, how do we evaluate if somebody is adding value and how do we compensate them accordingly? With Brian sort of firmly seated in the CEO role, how did it shift your day-to-day focus?
I would say less sales for us. Less sales and more focus on the product. So we can dedicate more time to actually creating things and solving problems.
Yeah.
And even like when we are involved in a strategic sales or building partnerships, because it's crucial, it's still great to to have someone who can build a scalable sales and marketing team.
Yeah.
And essentially that's I would say that's the biggest difference. But also like it's easier to not think a lot about talking to other investors.
Yeah.
So Brian covered this, and again, just helps us to focus on the solving problems and thinking about new products, new markets, new ideas. Restructuring of the team or building like some additional solutions, working on AI agents and working on layout sweeps, and basically exploring this wonderful world.
Maksim, you said that the hardest part isn't getting to product market fit. It's finding the recipe to scale without losing the soul of the product. So, Mike Tyson famously said, everybody's got a plan until they get hit in the face. I'm curious, what's been harder than expected about getting PVFarm out into the wild and helping to grow that product from its initial success?
Based on our previous experience, we actually did the right thing that before even launching the product commercially, we invited a bunch of industry partners or like basically different companies to kind of to do this the last mile together with us. So we were polishing it together with the partners, which again was amazing because we received tons of useful feedback and inspirations of what we want to build. And like when you're building software products, you need to balance, right? Which is overrated. Two main things. The first one is that there is a competition, and there are a certain number of things that you actually need to do well comparatively to your competitors so the people can choose you. But also there is an innovation. So basically it's like building your moat, but also like there is an innovation is like how much you actually want to push for like amazing ideas and the things that are not done today in the market, not suitable for the market due to different reasons, right? So balancing between like building for competition and building for innovation is a challenging part. So initially we built a product with, I would say, quite an innovative product. And the place where I feel like we hit the wall is those innovations, you need to spend so much time educating the market and like so much time to implement, to basically to make people implement this, to try this. Imagine someone is having a working workflow, like something just works. Like yesterday it worked, today it works, and then we come with PVFarm and like, hey, look, you can do it better. And it's like it's a hard sell. It's a very hard message. Yeah. So change is the most. I would say this is the biggest wall we hit so far in some ways, because it just takes so much time, and sometimes building like product even easier than that.
These are sort of byproducts in a way of this risk mentality, and the fact that these are really critical decisions. Like we take when our customers come to PVFarm, this is an important decision for them, and we understand that. And but these things take a long time sometimes to work their way through the organizations, right? I think one of the biggest challenges that anyone in sort of the AEC tech space has is the sales cycle, because it really takes a long time. People have to trust you. It's a lot of things still happen face to face. RE Plus is a great place for that, but it's once a year, right? At the big show anyway. So these things take time, right? And again, we're able to splash sort of on the market quickly, which is great, and we have some great logos on our website. But the word of mouth still has to get around for people to be like, okay, yeah, we're using that. You can trust that.
Right.
It has to kind of go through these informal channels.
Totally.
You can't just hammer people with like 8,000 emails and hope that they're like going to come spend money on your product. That's not how things are sold in this industry.
I think the interesting thing here is the good news is that this kind of software is sticky. The bad news is that this kind of software is sticky.
Yeah.
Right? Like you have to unstick somebody else, and that somebody else might be AutoCAD, but you've got to get the time and attention of someone. They've got to become your champion. Like that whole process is labor and time intensive, and people underestimate it.
Yeah, but also, Nika, it's not always like we try actually to not frame our value proposition as like in exchange for something, because it actually would take even longer. Even longer than what we have. We try to always find the added value, because then the sale is easier. So like instead of like saying, like use our product instead of other product, you can say like use our product because it does this for you, which you don't have today. And it shouldn't necessarily be in exchange.
Yeah. But then you've got to be able to quantify, right? You've got to quantify the value of that additionality.
Yes.
Yep.
Which is that's the lazy part that a lot of folks find themselves in, is that the hard work is actually figuring out, can I qualify and quantify the additionality so that I can say, you keep using everything you're doing right now, but here's the money you're leaving on the table.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we do a really interesting process that we sort of discovered this, but with our sales process, you can basically import anything from any other software into PVFarm. So we basically say, look, give us a project you know the answers to, and we will show you within PVFarm how you
Wow.
could get what other options you could have explored. And usually once we get to that process, there aren't a whole lot of people that walk away at the end of it.
Wow.
Yeah, we basically found this what we call co-piloted trial process.
Yeah.
Accidentally, we built a really bad user interface, and so to make sure that people don't run away right away, we basically invented co-piloted trial process, and then we realized, oh, there are actually good benefits of this process.
That's amazing. All right. So you guys have both been through kind of a decade-long apprenticeship to get to where you are, one in code, another in construction. Both have the conviction to be founders. I want to close with what that journey has taught you about yourselves. I think that every founder has habits that form over time, these ruts that we have to get ourselves out of. You have the advantage now that you've got a formal CEO and Brian coming in and showing you what it looks like to scale to the next level. What's your self-evaluation of the thing or things you had to unlearn to grow in this next phase of leadership?
I'm by default sort of a perfectionist, right? And if you're going to move quickly and you're going to delegate, which is maybe the more important piece of this, right? As you have a team, as you have more people that you're working with, letting people run with it, being comfortable with pushing stuff over the line quickly.
Mm-hmm.
That's still something I work on, right? Like this is like life learning types of things. But for me personally, I over the years I've developed sort of systems where I kind of know how it works and I write these down. So I have like notebooks where it sort of when I get to like sort of a Zen state in some place, I try to write it down. And then what I'll do is that when things feel kind of rocky or chaotic or whatever, I'll kind of go back and be like, oh yeah, shit, I actually know how to do this. Like, I stopped doing all of these things that are healthy. And sometimes it's personal, right? Sometimes it's like sleep or exercise or something like this, right? Basic shit. But also it's like systems, right? Like, how do you manage yourself? How do you manage other people? These sorts of things. So I try to keep like kind of a running tally of these so that I don't look at this every day, but when things start to go, press up against the guardrail, I kind of fall back on that. And these are the structures that sort of keep me in line.
Yeah, for me, I learned a couple of things. Definitely, first of all, that there are many different cultures. And the one I had before wasn't the best one. And I like basically the fact that right now, like we have like a very, like a very remote company with like people from all over the world, and mixing those different cultures in one company. This is definitely like a huge lift, and I learned a lot along this way, and I see a lot of things that could be done differently, but still very efficient, differently than how I did it in the past. So that's one thing. Another thing, I used to have this habit of like working hard. I always had this habit of like working hard without like literally like standing up and seeing what's in there, like what's where I'm going. Like I used to work hard for years without even checking like where I am right now. So now I think what I learned in the past couple of years is good to combine, working hard, but also with like constant strategy status checks in a way, like making sure that you're going where you still want to be, rather than you just, like kind of inertially doing the hard working part, right? So that's important part. And also, I would say I call it good enough principle, because I understand what Ben is talking when he is talking about being a perfectionist. I think learning about, okay, it's good enough, let's push it. So it's good enough. It's good enough. It's good enough piece of content. It's good enough LinkedIn post. It's good enough release. Let's just do it. Let's go. Like basically understanding where, and again, it's also this fucking balance, which is very overrated. But it's not about doing something on average, but it's about knowing where you need to do to push this extra mile versus where it's good enough. Stop it.
I'll tell you, it's interesting. You're hanging out with a founder if two words make them cringe: good enough. right? Like no founder I know loves those words. I swear to God, when I hear it on a call and they're like, this is good enough. I'm like, you probably shouldn't be on my team. Oh God. But it's healthy for me to hear you say this, Max, because I have watched I think I'm getting a sense of your personalities, and to know that you're at a place now where you're comfortable letting go of perfectionism, accepting good enough, it is a blind spot for most founders, that there is a zone called good enough and we often push way past it.
Yeah. But there is always, Nico, like one thing out of 10 where you don't stop at good enough.
That's
where
right.
you actually push till the end.
Yeah.
But it's not like 8 things out of 10.
Yeah.
It's one thing out of 10.
And that ultimately, if you're working on the business, not in the business, and you're looking up, like you said, you have the perspective to be able to say, no, this thing is not good enough.
Yes.
And you can,
Yes.
we talk about it internally as like defining what good looks like.
I don't remember who the framework was from, but there's this sort of framework of you have like 1x leverage, 10x leverage, 100x leverage, right? So if you think about things you have to do, there's some stuff you just have to do because it's required, but it's not high leverage, right? And then there's stuff that beyond that, so there's a sort of theory that you should always be working on the 100x stuff, as well as like getting the things done that you absolutely you can't skip, right? You can't skip payroll, you can't skip these types of things, right? But they're relatively low leverage. I don't think the model works perfectly, but it's a good framing, right? These are good framings for how to think about different problem sets.
Fellas, I know that I could hang out and chat with you for the rest of the day. We'd probably discover a whole lot of truisms around not just being a founder and running a business, but how to fix or how to improve the process that we are all about, which is deploying as much clean energy infrastructure as possible. I wonder, as we close, is there a belief that you feel you've discovered or uncovered or observed in the solar industry that you would fix if you could, that slows people down? What would that be?
In certain circles, there is, let's say there are only a handful of like specific categories within, especially with where we're working right now in utility scale solar, right?
Okay.
Like there's people who do this type of equipment or this type of product or this type of service or whatever, right? There's in certain circles, I feel like I hear about the competition within those as zero sum, and this I don't see it, right? I've heard it. I look at what's happening. I look at what companies are, the products that they're releasing or the ways that they're delivering their services. And I think there's just an incredible amount of room for all of these. And I wish that there was more openness about sort of sharing across those different groups, right? We talk to some of our customers and they're like, "Oh no, don't share, how wide our roads are on our project because that's proprietary knowledge or whatever." I'm like, that's not proprietary knowledge. Like, maybe there's a better size. Right? Why can't we have a conversation about these types of things? Yeah. It doesn't happen in the open very much. It does happen in closed circles. It happens at the bar. It happens at these events. But there's not a forum. There's not a maybe that's you, Nico, right? Like there's not a place for these discussions to happen in a routine way, right? It's not I can't go on a forum online, or I can't go into these places and find these discussions happening. But there's just, as we learn through our product, there's so much potential upside for sort of sharing these processes, right? And I really believe that that sharing process is something that we can unlock and is going to move things a lot more quickly.
This kind of culture of, I would say, constant non-stop in education. And, I used to think that engineers, and sometimes I think still, that engineers, they like to work in caves without other people. But that's about culture, right? So, and this culture can be changed. And we see like one of the greatest companies we met, they actually have like a like a sessions where engineers share experience with each other. They have this kind of exploratory educational sessions, and I think those things can lead towards like more openness and to more like a knowledge sharing and more kind of understanding of how important the specific handover plays in between various different disciplines and engineers.
Ben, Maksim, thank you so much for the incredible generosity of your time here today. I want to ask, and maybe I'll lean on you, Ben, if folks are so inclined, they want to learn more about you and your product, where can they learn more about you? How do they find you?
Find us on PVFarm.io. Also, Maksim is LinkedIn famous, so you're probably already friends with him.
Yep. We're definitely going to link to Maksim on LinkedIn so you guys can follow him. I encourage you to do so. Ben, Max, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to seeing you again out in the real world, and thanks for helping level us up in how we build these things.
Thank you, Nico.
Thanks for the conversation. Great.